Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and we are here today with the fabulous Karina Blackheart. Yes. And we are here to take another turn on the wheel of the year. We are here to talk about summer solstice. So let's get into it. First of all, what do we call it?
I call it summer solstice.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or midsummer. I don't usually call it midsummer because it is the beginning of summer where I live. And so hyper local, right? Um, People also call it Litha. Litha. I don't even really know how to pronounce it. I've only seen it written. I have never heard anyone say the word. But it is on all of your Facebook and social media things as Litha or Letha, which translates roughly as the middle of summer. So I'll just use the
It's
English.
special snowflake stuff right here.
Yeah. So we'll just simple and call it summer solstice for our purposes here today. So here we are at the midpoint of the year, right? We started at winter solstice in the dark, right? In the dreamy, quiet, slumbery, waiting for light, liminal space of winter, the longest night. And so here we are 4 Sabbats later, at the other pinnacle of the solar journey, right? So we're at the longest day, the shortest night of the year. Where I live, it really is the start of summer. The season shifted maybe the last 10 days of May. We had spring for a minute, and then it's summer. That's just how it goes. So spring here looks like barren trees and everything is still gray, right? And then I remember taking a picture one morning of the barren trees and the gray landscape and the fog hanging on because I live on the mountaintop, so the fog sort of hanging in the air. And I woke up the next morning. The grass was green. The buds had opened on the trees. The sun was out. And I was like, I better get to the garden right now. So planting season for us has been that time, right? From the very end of May until, I don't know, my housemate came home last night with a whole box of stuff to put in the ground. And I'm like, I can't even look at you. So this is a burst here where I live. This is, everything is in bloom. Some of the flowers have come and gone already. It's such a fast build up to this day, right? And till summer solstice. And then there's summer solstice, which the season is one of, right? If you're doing agriculture at all, which apparently I have a small farm now, that happened in since the last time we talked. I went from 3 raised beds to 20 raised beds and 4 beds in the ground, unless my housemate made more beds in the ground last night. Well, I wasn't looking. So we're growing a lot of food. We're growing a lot of food in response to what is happening culturally, right? So this series is really about, like, how do we ride this wheel in a really hyper local, personally relevant, culturally relevant way. So thank goodness I live where I do, and I live in a farming community. It's actually an agricultural community. So I'm surrounded by farmers. So they see me out there with my little raised beds and they're like, "You're going to need compost." And I'm like, "I know, but it's like $10 a bag." And he's like, "I'll see you on Saturday." And comes with a dump truck full of compost. So I'm responding to the intersecting cultural crises that we find ourselves in, some of us have been awake to for a long time, and some are just sort of waking up screaming. But growing our own food feels really important right now. I just posted something this morning. I'll share this bad news with on this podcast. Farmers in Idaho were just told by the government that they are not allowed to use any water. It is illegal for them to water all the fields of vegetation and potatoes that they planted this spring, that they took out mortgages to be able to plant. They mortgaged the land. All of their equipment is mortgaged. The stuff is in the ground and it's going to die there. Because I'm going to connect some dots here for people. Cobalt is needed to create lithium batteries and chips, something to do with chips for all of our computers. And if we don't want to rely upon China, or if we're not going to be able to rely upon China, then we have to figure out how to produce our own. And Idaho happens to have the largest deposits of cobalt on the planet. Cobalt requires tons. It requires all the water to be able to mine it. And then the water that comes out the other end of that process is toxic. So you will never be able to grow on that land. And potatoes are in everything. Potato byproducts are in a lot of our processed food. They're used as thickeners. They're used, we eat more French fries than. So when I say, are you growing your own food yet? Or do you know a small farmer, right, who is growing food? Can you chip in? Can you get a CSA? Sorry to start out this like high summer solstice holiday, right? That's about joy and growth and abundance and blah, blah, blah. But this is what's happening. And we need to be cognizant. We need to be culturally cognizant. And we, again, need to bring our food production back home. Even if that's all you have is a patio, you can grow food on your patio. You grow vertically, right?
I get a lot of tomatoes that way. I don't get a whole lot of anything else that way,
Mm-hmm.
but I get a lot of tomatoes that way.
Yeah. We will be giving tomatoes away this year. It's ridiculous. What we have done is ridiculous. But it's also in response to, we have the land, we have the seeds. I planted them all, right? And we know a lot of people who haven't, who don't, who can't, who are just starting out, right? Just thinking about it. And so I want to be able to give that food away and, of course, preserve whatever we can. So farming in an agricultural community, right? And humans have been agricultural, right? since the beginnings of time. It's only these last couple hundred years that we've gone off on this side quest that I guess we're going to carry it all the way out until the end. But this is a time of year where this moment where we are at the height of solar power, right? This is a time where the mythology talks about the Sun King, right? Lu, who very quickly he'll get cut down in in August, right? But we've sort of, if you're following that, the god mythology, then he was a young buck at Beltane, right? And now is a mature king, right? And that's not a warrior king, or though he might be. There's a particular deity who's, anyways. He, as a king, he's not on his horse attending the war, right? He's more strategy, right? And commander. But he's calm. He's he's wizened. He's certain. And this is the height of solar power, of that kind of masculine power. And then the day after solstice, we are in the downturn, right? Now, then we're losing solar power and sliding, riding that wheel into shorter days, longer nights, right? Agriculturally, it's a time to rest. The plants are in the ground, right? There's nothing to do to them except keep them wet and weed them, right? So that they have the nourishment that they need. And then you wait. So it's the dog days of summer are here. This is also a time, if of the very, 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 very first fruits, right? So rhubarb, strawberries, lettuce, spinach, the very tender greens are ready for picking and eating. I don't know. That's my intro and bad capitalist news.
And we'll circle back to the
Mm-hmm.
bad capitalistic news.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what this time means magically.
Well, all of that is magic. If you're practicing an earth-based tradition, right? The sun just went behind a tree and I'm sorry, I'm in the dark now. So we planted in at winter solstice, we were dreaming, right? Dreaming the future, dreaming what we would want the harvest to be. And at breed, we added fire and will and passion and clarity to those dream seeds, right? And then we planted them at spring equinox and watered them and tended them, and we're working with them, right? Like adding energy. Beltane, the seeds are ready, right? They're ready to go in the ground. They're ready to take root. They are manifest. They're not just a little seed anymore. Something is manifesting. Something is growing. It's small. It takes, and Beltane to summer solstice is hard work. So, and I'm talking about manifestation work, right? it's time, it's time, it's time, it's time, it's time, right? So we're sort of running and churning and trying to keep up and making manifest, right? Taking strides. We're starting to see the results of those dream seeds that we brought into being in the depth of winter. Summer solstice, some things are already starting to bear fruit, right? The flowers are blooming, right? The strawberries are ripe on the vine. So it's a moment to sort of sit back and give thanks and to be in gratitude. Summer solstice, for me, my rituals for summer solstice tend to be really, really simple. I don't think I've ever celebrated summer solstice like at a community gathering. Like maybe with my small coven, like my coven will be here on that night. It's just by accident. We just meet once a month and it just happened. But my summer solstice rituals tend to be very simple, like go stand in the sun and let the light get on your skin and into your being, and match that with your own light, right? With your own energy, right? If you don't like the word light, that's okay. But your own energy is also fiery. We talked about this way back at Breed, right? Like between our synapse and our nerve endings are sparks. That's fire. That's in us. The fire of our thoughts, the fire of creation is in us. So being in that high solar power and matching, shining as brightly as you possibly can, right? Whether that's outwardly to the world, whether that's in your business, whether that's in your relationships, but magically be allowing yourself some moments on summer solstice to just shine with yourself. Shine light into the dark places that are begging to be illuminated, right? See what's there. The other thing that I'll do, I'm going to ask you to hold that for a second. The other thing is I love honey spells. I love honey spells on summer solstice. And make your, honey spells traditionally are about like sweetening a relationship with someone or sweetening a situation. I love to make a honey spell for me, for myself, for my relationship with myself. Are you hearing that? Do you have an emergency thing happening on your phone? No? Okay. My phone is telling me there's an emergency. Oh, well, I'm prepared for whatever it is. So a honey spell for myself is about self-love, is about being sweet to me, right? Being sweet and gentle and soft at this pinnacle of power as an example, right, of continued sweetness in my life, by me, about me, for me, in all aspects, right? That's my relationships with my kids. That's the land I live on. That's my businesses. That's my, right? To just let things be sweet. And usually I'll make that, I'll put symbols in there and particular herbs, and seal that up. And I bring that to the river, and then wash in the river and give the honey to the river. That's about Oshun. That's a different, that's an African tradition that I have some training in. But sweetness, can we, in this moment, amid all of the madness, give ourselves some time to be sweet, to recognize the sweetness in our lives and to give thanks for the sweetness in our lives and to make whatever offerings feel right to us. So that sweetness can, if we're missing it, to bring it in, and if we have it, to increase it and have that be sustainable for us.
Okay, so you didn't answer my question,
I
but
didn't,
you
huh?
addressed it in an incredibly powerful way, so I want to circle round to it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think about a lot is how witch talk and Instagram witches talk about manifestation on a lunar cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing here is much more powerful, right? Because the manifestation that happens over a year's time
It's
bears
big.
much bigger fruit. But please talk about the differences and why, not that lunar manifestation doesn't work, but why this is so much bigger and more important.
Well, I mean, just scientifically, the sun is bigger, right? And its cycle is longer, right? I mean, magic is science. It's earth science, right? It's stellar science. Um, so yeah, on one level, it's a year-long cycle, and we call it a year because it's the solar cycle. Um, so rather than having a 28-day cycle, which is very powerful, I love lunar magic for smaller things, right? Like I need this in a month. I need this to
Itty thing.
happen this month. Yeah. Or I'm just going to utilize this quadrant of the lunar cycle, right? So the full moon, I don't know, it seems like TikTok witchery took the whole cycle and like did something to it that I don't recognize anymore. So people are like releasing stuff on the full moon, and manifesting stuff on the dark moon, and I'm like, I'm not a, I, if I say anything, then I'm a terrible gatekeeper. So let me just gatekeep for a minute. Um, that
Please.
that dark moon, the dark moon is not a new moon. The new moon is a day after the dark moon in old school craft, right? The dark moon and leading up to it, as that moon is waning, as it's waning, you are releasing, releasing, releasing. And on the dark moon, you're like, I'm done. That's it. It's whatever it was I was releasing, done, gone, finished. Then you start manifesting as the moon waxes toward full. And by the full moon, that's the night where that's what we're talking about with summer solstice, right? Is the fullness, the fruition, the completion, the manifestation. It's here. Thank you. So we stand in the full moon and we bring the full moon, in the old school craft, you draw the moon down into you. I mean, when was the last time you even heard anyone say, draw down the moon, right?
It's been
Yeah.
years, Karina.
Yeah.
Years.
So we draw that moon, that full lunar power into us and are one with it. So it's the same thing that I'm saying about this process with standing in the sunlight and drawing down the sun, feeling the sun on your skin, breathing the sun into the body. This solar orb is what, 94 million miles away, and yet it can burn my skin, right? It can boil a river. It can start a forest on fire. That's power. Witches deal in power, right? Yes, witches deal in spells, but you know what? The spell isn't in the herb. The
No.
spell isn't in the color of the candle. The spell,
No.
the spell is in you. You're the one who brings the elements of the spell together. Now, it's helpful to use, I don't know, a red candle for love or lust, right? It's helpful to use roses for that. But you don't need it. We don't need any of those things. They help our instinctual, intuitive, etheric, imaginal part of our soul to connect, to have the pretty colors and the glitter and the herb smells and the bells. All of that is brings that part of us on board, and we want that part of us on board when we're doing magic. Otherwise, our rational self will just shut it all down and be like, this is nonsense, right? But we can do spells just by saying them, or just by standing in the sunlight, right? Or planting a seed. So this is the moment to say thank you. What I've been working toward in this waxing cycle of the solar year is coming to fruition, or is at fruition, right? So my plants are planted, they're in the garden. Some things have like little flowers on them. Right? Like I can't do anything else to those plants. You can't go and pull on the plants to make them grow faster. You'll kill them, right? You can't push the river to make it go faster. Now we have to be patient for the fruit. Okay? Just like doing a lunar spell, if I'm using the cycle of the moon, there is this moment of like, no, I know that the work is done, because I've been building on that spell with my power every day for 14 days. I've been adding energy, adding clarity, adding specificity, adding precision, adding sincerity, right? So on the full moon, if I was like, I need $100, let's just use I need $100. On the full moon, I may not have that $100 in my hand, but I know the work is done. I know the work is done. I don't need, the proof will come. And that's where we are with the solar wheel, is the work is done for the seeds that you dreamt of at winter solstice. The fruits are coming.
So we're shifting into more receptive magics now.
Yes,
What
the
does that
wheel is
look
turning.
like as craft?
I don't know. Rephrase the question for me.
Receiving is hard. People don't receive well. They don't ask well, but they especially don't receive well.
Mm-hmm.
How do we receive magically? What does that look like?
I think it looks very similar to the asking, and that is that it's about attentiveness, right? It's about attentiveness. Am I cognizant? Am I aware of what's here? Am I aware of how the energy is building? So this whole time, this waxing year, right? We're like, the way that we draw it is sort of backwards to me, right? Because we put the winter at the top of it. and then we go down. But really, what we've been doing is building up from, right? We're building, 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 building. And it's hard work. It's hard work. But when the work is done, the work is done. And then your job is to pay attention to how it's manifesting. The pushing part is over. So receive when you're doing manifestation work, there's the spell, but then there's also the footwork, right? Which we've talked about in other podcasts of like, you can light all the candles you want, but if you're not taking care of your internal processes, right? If you're not creating an environment where what you want to manifest is going to manifest, it won't. Or you'll get something and it really might
It may
not
not be
be
what you want.
what you wanted at all, right? Because the powers that we're working with may be like, well, I could get you that, but but I got to take this in order to make space, right? And so in my practices, excuse me, it's very much more about like looking here first and saying, what's in the way? What are my beliefs, habits, ways of being, things I think I'm certain about, triggers that I have, traumas that I've experienced, right? Like what's in the way? The way that I relate to other people. What do I need to transform in here in order to receive well? Right? And that's different for everybody. It's probably not so different. I mean, I've been teaching people for 3 years. It's not so different. um, Humans are, are who we are, and generationally, we have a lot of the same, stuff. But in order to receive well, it's not just about push, 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 and then, oh, thanks, Christmas came, I got my wish, right? On a truly magical path, you've got to be matching the energy that you're trying to bring in. It's not mindset. I just led an event this weekend where people had been learning, doing mindset work for 4 days before I got there. And one of the first things I said to them was like, mindset's great. Mind over matter. Yeah, we can do this with mind over matter. But energy over matter, that's a whole different game. Right? So I don't know. Did I answer your question yet?
I think I want to talk more
Excuse me.
about being open. There's a sense of open is hard right now, right? Open is vulnerable, and open is, frankly, a liability in some cases socially right now. How do we be open to receiving while also being aware of this capitalistic hellscape we find ourselves in?
What immediately comes to mind is this prayer spell, self spell, that was given to me by Francesca de Grandes. You can look her up. It says, "I am open and safe. I am closed and sure. I am at peace. and moving. I am building. I mean, it's so simple, right? But it's the simplicity that makes it so powerful, right? And so sometimes the mantra is just, I am open and safe. I am open and safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a spell. That's a spell on yourself. You know, mantras are spells on ourselves, right? We say them and say them and say them and say them, or feel them or live them, right? Um, so how to be open in this time, I think one is not to expect that we're going to be open 24/7. We're not. Okay? That's a fantasy, that's a projection, that's a ask for, for somebody to be perfect, right? Well, I thought she was open and blah blah blah, and then she did that, or she said that, or whatever. And it's like, no, nobody's pretending to be perfect. If they are, run, right? Um, we're not going to be open all the time. We're going to get our feelings hurt. We're going to do what we do when we're afraid. We're going to freeze or fight or fawn, or what's the other one? Flee. Yeah, that's why I can't remember it, because that's what I do. I'm like, bye, I'm out. But I'm out because I want to be open. Do you know what I mean? So if we're constantly in situations where we have to shut down, my response is to leave, right? Because I want to be open. I want to be safe, right? But certainly in this world, right, with things as they are, it's very easy to feel completely unsafe, to feel utterly threatened, right? If you can see what is coming, some days I'm like, I don't want to be this open because I don't want to see. I don't want to see what the outcome of that cobalt mine that we talked about earlier is, but I see what it is, and I just want to be like, I don't want to know these things. I don't want to be able to see beyond um what's already here, because what's already here is bad enough, right? Um so how do we stay open? I think it's about getting in the body and staying in your body, right? I mean, one of the ways that we flee is to just leave the body, right? Is to dissociate, right? Or to be in some kind of denial, right? Can we hold, it's hard work to hold the both and, right? Like all of that is happening, and you and I are having this lovely conversation. And I'm looking out the window at this incredible greenery and these little roses that are, on this little hill. Um, a statue of Kuan Yin on the hill, who reminds me to like chill, right? And that's happening as well, right? My dog is like wandering around asking for something. Um, all of that, all of that is happening at once. So we get to choose. Sometimes we get to choose, if we know our nervous system, right? And again, the craft is about knowing yourself, right? Know the land, know yourself, know where you are, know the situation you're in, right? That's what this wheel year is about, right? Know yourself, know the land, know the situation you're in. So that if you know you and you know where you are and you know what's going on around you, you can make decisions that are grounded in reality, not out of freeze, fight, fawn, flee, right? 10 years ago, I was trying to figure out how to flee to a friend who lives in Europe. 10, when, oh, it was 2008. So it was a long time ago than 10. And really entertain that for about 6 years, you know. Now is not the time to be entertaining fleeing. That moment has passed. But if we can just stay present with, like, what is happening right here, right now? Am I in actual physical danger right now? I'm not. You're not. Right? I think there's, like, also limiting exposure to the terrible news, right? There's also making sure that you're not so limited that you're just listening to MSNBC, because they're not telling you the whole story, right? So if you can stay within your body and stay where you are, and say, okay, I'm gonna take in scary information for the next 15 minutes, not for the next weekend, not till 4 a.m, right? And scare myself so much that I can't sleep, that I can't function, that I can't remember where I am, that I'm still in my safe house with people who love me, right? Know where you are, know who you are, know what you can tolerate. Somebody else can tolerate 6 hours of bad news or streaming Game of Thrones nonstop. But I can't. And I want to watch it so bad. I want to binge it. I binged the whole first season like 3 times. Mhm. And then enough time went by in between that when I went to watch the second season, I got 2 episodes in and I went, "Oh, I'm having a trauma response."
And it gets
Right?
worse.
And I thought, "Oh shit. Like, then why was I obsessed with this before?" And the answer came, "Well, because it feels like home." Right? Not that there was, murder happening in my household, but the same feelings arose. And so I just don't expose myself to that. So, but other people can, right? So if you know yourself and your nervous system and your neurodiversity or trauma and how your body responds to it, then you know what you can manage and what you can't. So watch the news, go put your hands in the dirt, right? Watch the news, go spend some time in the kitchen. Watch the news, go hug your babies, right? We have to balance it. We can't just have a steady diet of gloom and doom because, on a really large scale, it's always been the end of the world. It's always been the end of the world. We just didn't know how it was the end of the world and around the world until recently, right? So we're kind of off on a tangent, but
So I'll bring us back. When we are receiving, the
mhm.
point is to protect the integrity of the message. How do I know the difference between what the universe is telling me and what the overculture is telling me?
That's just a little question.
I'm sorry. I thought we'd, close on something small here today.
Yeah. I think the only way I can answer that is just practice, right? Practice and like talk to other people. Talk to other people with bodies, right? Um have people that you trust that you can say, I'm getting this message. Does this sound like my ego? Does it sound like I stayed up watching TikTok till 4 o'clock in the morning and listened to all of the leftist conspiracy theories? Because they're just as bad as the other side, right? Um, does this sound like this, right? Um, Here's the thing though, what is happening on the planet is the universe. We're part of the universe, right? Um, but I definitely highly recommend having people who are as adept or more adept than you are in your magical path to check in with. Terry Pratchett has this line that I just love, and he says, witches don't really like each other very much. I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting Terry Pratchett. Freaks who know every line in the book by heart. I don't have that skill. But he said, we don't really like each other that much. We kind of tolerate each other, but we need each other. And so we get together to make sure that nobody's gone off cackling. Right? And in my lineage, that's what we call it. We're cackle check, right? I think that you're cackling, right? I think that you're been fooling around with that particular deity for so long that you think that you are him, or maybe you're possessed by him, and that's not really working out well for you in your day-to-day life. Maybe cut it out, right? So, and this is why we don't like each other either, because we tell each other that, we're like, hey, cut it out. You're like, you're not okay. Right? Or we're like, you're amazing. That's fantastic. I can't believe, like you're doing so well. All of your stuff is coming to fruition, right? Your power is glistening, right? And sometimes we have a hard time hearing that. If your power is glistening, you're probably not having a hard time hearing someone tell you that, though. But having other human beings, right, that you can have these conversations with, that one aren't gonna join your cult, right? Because you can, like, because you can see the future, right? So people are like, I need to, you don't want that, right? I don't want people to follow me like a cult leader. I don't want to be a cult leader. God, I'm like so busy already. Having to manipulate all those people would just be exhausting.
It's too much. It's too much.
It's too much. Yes, that's somebody else's job. You want to have people that you can trust, that you're intimate with, right? And again, how do you get that? Know yourself. Know yourself. Pay attention to how your body responds around other people and how they talk to you and how they treat you. And if you learn from
So
them, if you're inspired by them. Yeah.
the thing here is, Karina,
Yeah.
to all of the questions that I have asked you today, the
Mhm.
answer is community.
Mhm.
How is it that in this time of great connection, we are less connected than ever?
Because that device that you just held up is not a person.
Mm,
Your people are not really in there.
no.
I post all the time. Here, this is what I did today. This is what, here's my beautiful garden. Here's the terrible capitalist oracle of the day, right? Those people, they don't live with me, right? They don't, like 3,000 followers. They don't live with me. They don't know what's on my heart that day, right? They don't know what I'm worried about, you know? My people are not they don't live in the device. So in order to have community, we have to spend time together. And time together is not 2 sentences or even 2 paragraphs that you read that were crafted because you know 2,850 of those people you never even met in your life, right? So our community they are not on our laptops. They are not on Zoom. We can see them and we can communicate with people that way. But community, I think, to be really effective, I'm just going to say this, and it's hard because we're all doing online communities and online businesses, and you have to be in the physical presence of people, right? You're breathing the same air when you're in the same room. You're exchanging energy. You're literally breathing the same air, right? Eating a meal together, sharing food, to see just the little wrinkle of a smile at the corner of a friend's eye does not happen on a Facebook post, right? We need each other. We really need like in-person live people in our lives. And I called a friend of mine 2 weeks ago and said, I think I'm dying of loneliness, right? I wasn't joking. I wasn't being overly dramatic, right? And I said, I've been doing this thing. I've been working so hard on my business, blah, 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 blah. I said, but I miss people, I miss people. And because of the circumstances of being a solo parent and moving very, very often because of what our circumstances were, I didn't put roots down somewhere. Like I've always lived in this area, but I had two little kids that I was the only one in charge of, right? And did not have all the supports that I just didn't have any support, let's say that. And so I have been able to develop very intimate relationships with people who are now, part of my coven. But we don't all live near each other, right? And so I was hungry for like people in my space. And my friend said, so what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And so we came up with a list of like, join a writers group, right? Join a book club. She said, you could lead a writers group. You could and I'm like, I don't want to be the leader. That's a job. I want to be friends with the people who are going to the thing that somebody else is leading, right? So leadership can separate us from people too. What else can I do? Well, I can go to the brewery that is literally in my backyard that I never go to because I'm an introvert and I'm a recovering alcoholic, right? But I mean, really, they serve beer and they close at 9:00. It's not really a bar. But I'm like, new people. We need people. So yes, we can scroll on our phone. How many of those people do we know? Really know? It's not the same as sitting down and sharing a meal or having a cup of coffee or sharing ideas about a book or a movie or I don't know, knitting or whatever it is that you like, whatever it is that you like to do. I think the pandemic really hurt us. I think that we have not recovered well. And the pandemic coupled with the cold civil war that we're in, um, is not making any of us healthier, right?
And I just want to reiterate, this is the magic of the year. This sounds so dire. And also, we're saying the magic here is in your local community. Go make friends.
Yes, right. This is all about, again, what is personal to me? Where do I live? Hyper local. And be cognizant of the larger cultural shifts that are happening so that you personally can respond without losing your mind, right? And you collectively can respond with people who are your neighbors, right? I mean, I happen to live in a place where my neighbors are just the nicest, most phenomenal people I've ever met, right? Um, Thank you. Thank you, universe, for this, right? I live in a community that has always been an agricultural community. It's very rural. Winters are very hard, and people know that they have to be able to rely on each other. So, yeah, there's a couple old guys who won't drive around with their big trucks and they've got a flag hanging off the back of it. And you know what? Nobody asks them about it. And they're not proselytizing. The as far as their proselytizing goes is they got a big flag hanging off the back of their truck. Okay. I can't be certain what that means. I can guess what that means. I know what it means when I drive by that house who has the Trump signs out. I know and I know where these people are. But I also think that in an emergency, that all goes out the window because people are people here where I live. I'm very blessed. But learning to put myself out there, learning to receive, learning to give graciously. I mean, my neighbors who do so much for me, and it's like they will not take money from me. They were insulted when I first moved here, and I'm like, well, how much do you want me to pay you? And the guy was like, you're going to pay me, blah, blah. And I really, because I'm not from here and I didn't grow up with that, right? I didn't know how to receive that. And I don't want to insult them. So, I make them dinner once in a while. I just make extra food and I drop it off at their house. That's what I can do. That's what I know how to do. That makes me feel as good about what I'm doing as he feels when he plows my yard, right? So there's a reciprocity there. And we're not intimate. They don't know the intimate details of my life and vice versa. I mean, we talk. But that's community, right? They're not witches. We don't have everything in common. What we have in common is we're neighbors. And here we are. And this world is swirling around us. And, I'm like, I'll bring you vegetables because they're not growing. I live in what used to be their childhood house, right? This was a potato farm at one point. And he doesn't want anything to do with farming. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll bring you fresh vegetables, right? Are those the people I go to and I say, do you think I'm crazy because I think that this is what's going to happen with the cobalt mines? No. No. They'll be like, what are you talking about? Because they're not even clued in. Know yourself, know where you are, know your neighbors, understand what's going on around us. And so on this summer solstice, I think it's not a bad idea to stand in the solar light and give thanks for who you are, where you are, and that you're cognizant of what's going on and that you have the capacity to think a little bit into the future at least and make plans for as long as those plans work, right? We don't know. So that's a bummer. And solstice is like supposed to be, but we're also sort of at the height of this, I hope, uh, of this madness that we're living through, right? We all know something is going to break, right? So as we turn our faces, so we've been all of this sort of build up and being in the space of the height of solar power, and now we sort of turn toward a little bit of rest, a little bit of relaxation, trusting that what we've been manifesting is in process, is happening. We can see some of the results, right? And that harvest is coming. Abundance is coming. And then deep rest is coming.
Karina, thank you. This has been an absolute delight.
I didn't mean to scare everybody.
No, I
Yeah.
think it's the both and. There is
Mhm.
great joy in this time, and there
Yes.
should be some real awareness of what is less than joyful.
Yep.
Thank you for guiding us through this liminal space.
Yeah. I want to take just a minute and tell you what's coming on my agenda. Um, so I'm just opening up some different kinds of ways to work with me one-on-one. In the past, I've just had what's called big crone energy sessions, which are kind of amorphous, right? Like I can work with you on anything, and I really can. But if you're looking for something specific, that might be too much to take in. So I found ways to work with me down into like very specific um, topics to address. So I'm offering some shadow work sessions that are 9 weeks going deep into the shadow. And look, now we're past the summer solstice. So it's time for shadow work. It's always time for shadow work. But I'm also doing some sessions called the prima donna sessions. So if that's yourself first, prima donna translates as the first woman, the first lady. So putting yourself first. And coming up in August is soul doctoring sessions, which is about getting to know your spiritual anatomy, and how your soul, how the parts of your soul work together and against each other, so that we can get them more and more fully aligned and working together, so that all of your parts are going in the same direction and not at odds with each other. So there's sessions, but I'm also going to be offering some seminars on that. That's group work. This is the foundation of all the work that I do. No matter what I'm doing, I'm always sort of coming back to, you've heard me say it a million times on this podcast, know yourself, know yourself, know yourself, know yourself. This is how we get to know ourselves. What am I actually made of? We have a right and an obligation to know how we are spiritually made, so that we can operate with all of our cylinders um, together, rather than my head wants to do this, my heart wants to do that, my spirit's giving me something else, my body is breaking down, right? Like, how do we bring ourselves together so that we're one, so that we know who we are, and we can stand in that place of like, all of this is swirling, but I know I'm solid. It's not that I don't care, it's that I'm solid. It's not that I'm feelingless, it's that I'm solid. And so with that solidity, we can literally create miracles, magic. Soul doctoring. This is the project I've been working on behind the scenes for like 5 years and have been teaching for 30 years. But I'm been working on it for 5 years on how do I bring this to a larger audience than people who want to sign up for this in-depth initiatory path, which I'm not teaching anymore. So if you want to get in touch with me about any of that, you can see it. It will be arriving on email if you're on my email list. You can go to my website, thecroneherself.com, or if you follow me on any of the social media channels, I'll say something about it there if I remember.
We will have links in the show notes, y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so much,
Karina.
Brian.
We will be back in approximately 6 weeks.
And we'll be having first harvest.
First harvest. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Because I said so. All right, y'all. Have an amazing